Assalamu alaikum. Today I'm going to look at the impact porn is having on women. In my previous video, I looked at the impact porn was having on men, but today I'm going to be focusing a bit more on what impact it has on the other sex. What we know is that there is a significant impact that porn is having on both sexes, and I'll have a look at this in more detail. But let's look at some statistics first. Pornhub, which is one of the most popular porn websites, gets roughly about 100 million visitors a day. In 2018, they received 33.5 billion visits a year. That's roughly, if you look at it, more than 5 times the population of the entire planet in a year. Australians are big users of porn websites generally, and a quarter of those roughly in Australia are women. Now, the number of single people in the Western world is also increasing, and this has a little bit to do with porn as well. In US, they did a survey where they looked at people aged between 25 and 54. And what they found was that 50% of those people were single. That had gone up from 29% in 1990. So it was 29% people were single 30 years ago. Now it's 50%. So it has significantly gone up. And in Australia, 1 in 4 people live alone. So we're not that far behind that statistic as well. Now, porn is working against the basic tenet of marriage. If you think of the time when you were first in love with your wife, or whenever you were in love, it's one of the best feelings that you're going to get. God mentions this feeling when he talks about love in Surah 30, verse 21, where he goes, he created mates for us that we may live in tranquility with them, and he created love and mercy between our hearts. He also says in Surah 2, verse 187, that he made our mates, wife and husbands, like libas, which is like a cloth. So in marriage, you experience the beauty of love, and our partner, whether it's husband or wife, protects us and makes us better. But porn is working the exact opposite of that, and I'll have a look at that in this session. Now, in my teenage days, we didn't have access to porn as easy it is now. For us, the easiest way, or the only way really, was to go into a petrol station, and you would have got access over there. That's the only way you would have got through a magazine. So it was much more difficult. Fast forward today, and porn can be accessed from any phone, any device, anywhere, and children as young as 10 years old are accessing it now. Now, another real downside of porn that's happening at the moment is that men in their 20s and 30s are using Viagra because they're struggling with erectile dysfunction and other issues. Now, whereas before the erectile dysfunction was an issue that was primarily the domain of men in their 50s and 60s, or people with medical issues, today men as young as 20s are taking it, and men in 30s, which is quite a big change from the last 20 and 30 years. And you may ask why that is. So I'll give you a little example. Imagine a 10, 11 or 12-year-old starts watching porn. They've been watching it for 10 years and they're in their 20s. The way our brain works is our brain feeds on variety and uncertainty. Now, they may start with normal porn, but that will eventually, their brain will get conditioned to that, and they're going to want something a little bit more. So they may start looking at threesomes, for example. Or after that, when the brain gets used to that, then they might look at orgies. After their brain gets used to that, they will look for more aggressive form of porn. You name it, you'll have the variety if you go onto these websites to watch African, Asian, Indian, anything that your brain wants in terms of variety, you will get it. Now, once you get used to this, how on earth are you going to get arousal with just one woman or one man when you're used to endless amount of variety on these websites? So it's very little wonder that our husband or our wife, we're struggling to get aroused after a certain period if we've been watching too much porn, which is getting more and more within society. Now, it's a really simple principle. Every time you watch porn, you produce a dopamine hit. So, like the example I was giving before, if you watched a certain amount of porn, for example, normal, certain amount of dopamine produced. Then you get more variety of a different genre, and then more dopamine produces. So it's very difficult once your brain starts producing such a high level of dopamine that you're going to be able to be producing that amount of dopamine with just one person. And which is why there's so many intimacy issues within marriages and relationships these days. But the mistake we're making is that we're thinking this is a male issue. And this is not a male issue. This is a male and a female issue. And now I'll have a look at some of the downside impacts that's having on females as well. So what are these impacts? Firstly, take into account that a third of the users of porn at the moment, they are females. So this is not just a male problem. So women addicted to porn produce the same dopamine rush that men do. So if they're used to a certain type of porn, then if they're not getting that dopamine rush within their partners, they're not going to get aroused for their husbands or their partners. So it's the same problem. So just like men get used to if they watch a lot of porn, they get used to a certain type of a body that they see in these videos, whether it be plastic surgery, you name it. Women will also get used to a certain type of a guy in these porns, whether it be someone of a very tall height or very muscular, and they won't always get that within their real-time relationships. And also keep in mind that in a lot of porn videos, they don't shoot the scenes in one go. They take breaks in order to get the best impact. So that's nothing like real-time intimacy with your wife or husband, where if you are having any issues, you can work with your husband and wife to get better, communicate. But porn doesn't reflect reality in that case. So that's a big problem. So conditioning, just like men, women also get conditioned to seeing a certain type of guy on porn, and that makes their arousal with real-time men much more difficult. Now, secondly, research also shows that some females are now being conditioned by aggressive porn that they see in porn a lot. So I'll take an example of a 23-year-old mother of two and wife who commented on her usage in relevantmagazine.com, and she said that she got addicted to porn and she craved the next porn flicks all day long. She hid from her family and her loved ones in order to watch porn, and only responded to very specific stimulation which was based on aggression, where she taught herself from porn that she deserved to be hurt, and that because women in porn get hurt, so that she deserved the domination, pain, disrespect, and that's how she trained herself. Now, she taught herself that it was okay for men in relationships to do that. And it took years of counseling from what she says. This took her years of counseling, communication, and healing to work through those issues. So these are videos and pictures that are really conditioning us in a certain way, and it takes a lot of work to get out of it. So that's a real good example how the aggression can shape you in a certain way as well. It doesn't just shape the men, it shapes the females as well. Now, thirdly, women who view porn find it harder to climax intimacy with their male partner and husband, just like men do. So they did a survey where they looked at some women in the US and some women in Hungary who were viewing porn, and they found that the women in America were reporting more difficulties in getting sexually aroused and achieving orgasm, and this correlated with the fact that they were watching more porn as well compared to the women in Hungary. Now, research in Journal of Women's Health showed women who were more accustomed to porn for masturbation used the heightened recall of pornographic images when they were having sex. So this is the same issue that was mentioned with men as well. So what this basically means is this: when you're with your husband or wife, in the case of a woman, when you're with your husband, you're visualizing the porn image that you have in your mind. So you're not really with your husband at the time. You're actually visualizing what you saw on porn. And men do this as well. And it's a real shame because it ruins the whole aspect of love and sex, because why are you even with the person when you're going to be visualizing what you saw on porn? But that's the whole case of our brain getting conditioned, the dopamine release, that we are resorting to that when we're with our husband or wife. So that's a big downfall as well. So that's number three. Now, number four, research in the Journal of Women's Health reveals that women who view porn regularly have real insecurities about their appearances, and thus it reduces their enjoyment. And this impacts men as well. And the reason being is very simple. The people we see in porn, whether they're men or women, there may be a lot of plastic surgery there and a lot of ways to make them visually a lot more appealing to us, which you just might not get in real life. And there's so many other things to focus on real life on than that, but it's actually making us ungrateful. Social media is adding to that. Porn's actually making that worse as well. Put it simply, men and women don't feel that they match up physically to the people they see in porn. So for that, I would say that if you have a look at Surah 49, verse 13, God makes it very clear that those closest to him are those that have the best heart. So God is not focusing on how tall you are, or what skin color you have, or how much muscles you have, or how skinny you are, or how big your lower body is, or how big your upper body is, or how big any of your features are. But he's just looking at your heart, how sincere you are, how much you help other people. And really, if you can break from the pressure that society puts on us, which most people feel, I think, about their body image, you really break the shackles of being a slave to that pressure. And I really encourage you to do that. And lastly, the last reason is the taboo that it's difficult for women to get help for porn addiction. I think it's common knowledge that men have porn addiction. Men, I think, can get help more readily, but it's not, the avenues are not really there for women. But you have to keep in mind that when God tells us to keep our stare down or not to have sex outside of marriage, he's dealing with both males and females equally. He's not just dealing with females or just with males. It applies to both, and he doesn't make a distinction between that. So really, if you need to get help, seek counseling and get the help that you need. Now, in Islam, we don't believe in watching small quantities of porn and saying that it's okay. And I'll give you the reason why that is, why I understand that to be the case. No person who's a porn addict today started with the goal of becoming a porn addict. They started with the simple goal of maybe just enjoying a little bit of porn. And as time went on, they became addicted. Perhaps it was significant stress that made their addiction worse. But just like with drugs and alcohol, it's very difficult for people to start off in small amounts and over time to keep that under control. So that's why in Surah 24, verse 30, God tells us to keep our stare down. He doesn't say that you can look a little bit and then stop. He tells us that we're not supposed to look at anyone except our wives, and in the case of wives, except their husbands. So, and the same thing goes for other addictions as well. So, as I mentioned in my previous videos, if you are struggling with a porn addiction, and this applies to females in this video, get help. First of all, acknowledge the addiction, remove your access to it or reduce it, and look for activities, positive activities such as exercise, praying, meditation, mindfulness, hiking. Get out in nature really helps actually with any type of addiction that you have. And one that I would say very strongly is that read the Quran in your own language. I suffered from uncertainty in the last few years. What I found was that you can read this book in your own language. You don't need an expert to teach you how to read it. In your own language you can, and God actually says in the Quran that he made this book easy to understand. And that's what I found as well in the last few years. I didn't need anyone to teach me. I read it in English and alhamdulillah, I was able to understand a lot of it. And you know, it's a journey, you continue with it, but it gives you a lot of positive advice. And so that's one that I would highly recommend if you're suffering from any type of addiction. And lastly, I would say ask him for help. In Surah 24 verse 21, it states that you can only purify if God allows you to purify. So you really got to ask for his help. And like I said, bring in some positive activities, because this is something that's impacting a lot of relationships and marriages. And the impact is not just on men, it's equally on women. And it's something we have to do, because we've got a generation now, especially in the last 15 years, guys and girls who've grown, they've grown up on porn. They've seen nothing else. It's been accessible to them. They don't know anything else beside that. So we really got to make the change. Not only young people, but all people, male and females. And inshallah, you get blessed with better intimacy in your marriage. Thank you for your time. Assalamu alaikum.